Heaven sent.
Throughout the vast history of gaming and its constant evolution, one certain genre can be held responsible for creating some of the most memorable gaming IPs of all time. From the classic Metroidvania stylings in Symphony of the Night to the three-dimensional masterpiece that is Spyro the Dragon, these games all had something in common while remaining very different from each other. But what they had in common was that they were platformer games. And while the definition of a platformer may vary for certain people, most games of this genre share the commonality of puzzle solving, run and jump mechanics, as well as an overall objective to get from point A to B. Now, platformer games were one of the most popular genres for well over 2 decades, really getting its bearings in the 80s with games such as Donkey Kong and Space Panic. This genre later gifted us many other legendary franchises, including the Super Mario Bros., Sonic the Hedgehog, and Mega Man, just to name a few. And with such a popular genre reigning supreme for as long as it did, it's fair to say that the gaming industry was well abuzz, with every other studio trying to come up with their next big platforming franchise. But with so many different platformers being released around the same time, it's safe to say that there were more than a few that ended up being swept under the rug. So today, we're here to tell the story of one certain title that seemed to slip into the cracks of gaming history, only to be overlooked by its competition for much too long. A game that was the blood, sweat, and tears for a development studio now defunct, and a game that personally shaped my childhood. Today we're here to discuss the PlayStation 1's forgotten platformer by the name of Wild 9. But before we dive into the innovative and sometimes depraved nature of this lesser known masterpiece, allow me to indulge you all into a little history of its origin. So please, sit back, grab yourself a nice beverage, and enjoy the ride, because it's sure to be a wild one. Going back in time to the early 80s, our story begins with the endeavors of one developer by the name of David Perry. David was programming and creating his own video games from home at the impressive age of only 15 years old. After creating his first title for the Sinclair ZX81 home computer, he decided to take his passion a bit more serious, moving to London, England after his 17th birthday, with ambitions of meeting other developers and hopefully furthering his career in the gaming industry. He ended up working with Probe Software on the development of the Terminator game, which was pretty well received for its atmospheric visuals as well as excellent soundtrack. This project got his foot in the door with Virgin Games, the company who published the Terminator, and eventually led to him moving to Irvine, California to work on the internal dev studio of the Virgin Games American branch. In his time with the company, he helped produce 3 successful games, all of which were made for promotional purposes. One of these games being Global Gladiators, a promotional game for McDonald's in which one of 2 characters must traverse through 4 different worlds, guided by Ronald McDonald in search of golden arches. Now that sounds like fast food propaganda to me. But anyhow, these games were all quite successful and profitable for the company. So much so that David decided to take his leave from Virgin Games in search of something a bit more on his own terms. At this time, David was receiving multiple offers from other development studios, hoping to get him on board and work on some of the upcoming releases of the early 90s. One of these offers came from the Sega Technical Institute, in which Mr. Perry politely declined. And while somewhat declining a similar offer from Playmates Toys, he ended up striking a deal with them to fund his own independent development studio, in exchange for the first 3 games that the studio creates to be published by the funding company. Playmates had agreed to this deal, and Shiny Entertainment was successfully formed in its wake. The name Shiny was the product of David's love for the band REM and their song Shiny Happy People, a widely popular song at the time of 1993, and the entertainment suffix being used due to his hopeful ambition to work alongside movie production companies. Now, at the time of Shiny's inception, there wasn't much on the table for David as far as projects go, or even a simple business plan, but because of Playmates being so new to the game, they weren't pressuring David, so much as they were helping him to find ideas to work with. They started with looking into movie licensing, and to possibly make a game based off of a movie or TV show. And there were talks of creating a game based on the Knight Rider TV series, but unfortunately, this plan fell through. Luckily though, a breakthrough was right around the corner, upon Shiny hiring its newest animator by the name of Doug TenNapel, a man responsible for creating the very first sketches of the iconic video game character, Earthworm Jim. Both David and Doug were enthralled in this concept, and decided that Earthworm Jim would be the very first project of Shiny Entertainment, and they felt they were going to need to find a unique way to market this game. And luckily for their partnership with Playmates Toys, Their ideas came to form a set of Earthworm Jim figurines, as well as a show produced by Universal Studios to accompany the products. In October of 1994, the game was officially released on multiple platforms. It was met with an incredible reception. All across the board, critics were in love with its fluid animations, as well as its ambitious nature. It even won an award for the best Sega Genesis game by the video games publication. Shiny had finally produced their first game, and it was a massive success, and with such momentum guiding this studio towards the future, the many fans of Earthworm Jim were eager to see what the studio had in store for them next. Now we're going to fast forward a bit to the year of 1998, and by this time, a lot had happened at Shiny Entertainment. Perry had struck a deal to sell the company to Interplay Productions, on the terms of Shiny retaining its identity and management under new ownership. This buyout led to around half of Shiny's employees to leave and form their own studio, with one of those employees being Doug Apple. After that, Shiny went on to produce the banger of a first-person shooter by the name of MDK in 1997. But as we're coming up on the release of the game we're actually here to talk about, I think it's necessary to preface how much of an inspiration Earthworm Jim was on the development of Wild 9. And they knew they wanted to create something unique, just as they had done before. They knew that with this game, it was going to be a bit tricky. The beginning development of Wild 9 started in 1996, sharing many key members in the making of the Earthworm series. Now they had initially planned for the game to star a female protagonist, who would use a special glove that was capable of vaporizing enemies. This idea progressed into an item that would give its players 1,000 times the strength of a normal human, allowing the character to pick up and throw around virtually anything. And considering that type of mechanic into a platforming environment was definitely looking to be a game changer. Now this idea continued to evolve until they finally settled upon the main character Wex and his use of a mysterious item called the Rig. The game was originally set to be developed for both the Sega Saturn as well as the PlayStation, but plans for the Sega release ended up falling through after Perry had stated feeling like the Sega was no longer a commercially favorable platform. Wild 9 was officially set to become a PS1 exclusive and was slated for a September of '98 release. And with over $4 million being used for the marketing of Wild 9, as well as a demo of the game being included with almost every PlayStation 1 console, it was looking to be another successful release for Shiny Entertainment. But what was the game about, and how did it play? Well, let's find out, shall we? The overall plot of the game is a bit strange, but the game itself doesn't really do much in terms of giving you a narrative to follow. So I'll give you a brief summary. The game stars Wex, a young man who has become lost in an unknown galaxy. He's the leader of a group called the Wild 9 and possesses the power of an item called the Rig, which gives him the ability of superhuman strength. The Wild 9 are a group of odd adventurers, and all but Wex and the strange bat-looking creature that lives inside of his rig have been kidnapped by an evil baddie by the name of Karn. Karn wants the power of the Rig for himself and is hoping to lure Wex into his clutches by taking his friends hostage, and that's pretty much it. Now the game starts off with Wex crashing on a planet called Bombopolis, and we're met with the many helpful hints from our friend Angus, who lives inside of the Rig. Angus is going to be our guide into the many cool and interesting mechanics that are found throughout the game, and will pose as a sort of tutorial for us. This planet seems desolate and dangerous, and we're obviously not welcomed. Once you see how hostile the rocket launching minions are at the sight of Wex, you'll see that this game is going to be a bumpy ride. Now the Rig and its powers are a huge part of the game's puzzle solving and combat, as you'll use it to both decimate and evaporate your enemies. The game also encourages you to play with your food, as it will give you many different grisly tools to dispose of your enemies with, from meat grinders, to fan blades, acidic goo, and even deadly heights. The game wants you to basically torture your enemies. I mean seriously, they put it on the cover art. And in some cases, you'll have to in order to progress. Now as we said, the Rig is very important in combat, but it's also a necessary tool for making your way through each level. With the use of its hyper strength, you're able to use the Rig to move around large objects, and even swing to higher platforms. And with this tool being such a huge mechanic in the gameplay, it really makes for a unique platforming experience. The environments are gritty and incredibly well detailed, really setting the mood for its dismal atmosphere. Also complementing the mood is the use of both an amazing electronic and industrial soundtracks. But when it comes to this game, you better be prepared for a challenge, because this was the 90s, baby, and games back then had absolutely no problem ripping you a new one. Now I personally played most of my platformers, including this game, when I was much younger, so it had been a while since I had indulged in the likes of one for at least a decade or two. So upon me revisiting this game, I was pretty blown away by how difficult it was. I mean, certain levels you're going to find yourself getting very familiar with. You'll die, and die, and die again, until you realize, hey, I have missiles. But then you go back to dying again. And this is made even more difficult by the fact that extra lives can only be earned through the rare token you may find laying around certain maps, or by collecting 99 of the Wild 9 tokens, which isn't easy. Now, although the game is difficult, it shouldn't deter you from experiencing it, as it really does live up to the incredible studio that created it, and in my opinion, is one of the greatest games on the PS1. And while you'll be doing a lot of platforming in this game, they also found some very unique ways to break up the monotony between levels, with multiple different mini-games being introduced to transition through each map. You'll find yourself in spaceship dogfights, free-falling while grappling onto your enemies, and riding some very questionable beasts as you venture through the game's relatively short story mode. And while the game may not include any cutscenes or really much of a narrative at all, I found myself really sucked into its atmosphere, and feeling very nostalgic with all of its late 90s gaming aesthetic. It's a game that I've always felt has been severely overlooked, and I've honestly yet to meet anyone in person who even remembers it. But as far as my introduction into gaming being on the PlayStation 1, I'd put a lot of hours into the demo disc that was included with the console. And since this disc had a demo for Wild 9, safe to say I was incredibly intrigued by the game as a youth. And the sound effects and shrill screams of your tortured enemies are just something that's been burned into my brain ever since. It's a game that in my opinion was probably overlooked due to the wide range of other great games that were released in 1998. I mean, going up against Resident Evil 2 or Metal Gear Solid, forget about it. But even so, I thought I could make this video in hopes of highlighting a hidden gem and hopefully reinvigorate an interest for the game. If you're a fan of platformers, strange concepts, and 90s aesthetics, then this is your game. It's one of those titles that has always stuck with me, and hopefully you can give it a chance as well. It's a testament to the unique nature of its era, and even more so, an example of how taking a simple concept and adding a twist on it can be so effective. Platforming games have and always will play an important role in their world of gaming, but for me, to keep a hidden gem like this a secret, now that would be a crime. But anyways, that's our look into the PlayStation 1's forgotten platformer. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if any of you have any personal experience with Wild 9, let me know in the comments. Let's chat about it. I've got a lot more in store for you guys on this channel, and I'm really excited about all the future content I'm going to be dishing out. But also, please feel free to leave any suggestions on games you'd like to see me cover in the future. I'm always open for suggestions. But until next time, stay safe, stay blessed, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out.